The lawyer set the wooden box on the conference table, and the room went quiet in the way rooms go quiet when something arrives that nobody planned for. It was cedar, dark with age, brass latch worn smooth, the initials HM carved into the lid in letters that had deepened over decades into something that looked less like an inscription and more like a scar the wood had decided to keep. I had seen that box on my grandfather's desk for as long as I could remember. I had been told, in various gentle ways over the years, that it held family photographs, old documents, things of sentimental value. I had never opened it. My Aunt Karen was seated at my left. She had arrived at the will reading in the blazer she reserves for occasions she considers important, which told me she had already decided how this morning was going to go. She had a legal pad. She had 2 pens. She was the kind of woman who brought 2 pens to things. The lawyer, a quiet man named Arthur Greer, who had handled my grandfather's affairs for 20 years, set his hand briefly on the lid of the box. Henry left one additional letter, he said. He was specific about when it should be read and who should be in the room. He looked at me, not at Karen, not at my mother, not at the 4 cousins arranged along the far wall. At me. Karen's pen stopped moving. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 32 years old and I teach 2nd grade at Lincoln Elementary in the same town where I grew up, which means I spend my days with children who are still learning the difference between what is fair and what is simply how things are. I am patient with that confusion because I understand it from the inside. I have spent most of my life in it. I am a good teacher, I think, not because I am naturally gifted, but because I pay attention to the details that other people walk past. I notice which child has gone quiet. I notice which one stays at the back of the line when everyone else pushes forward. I notice the ones who do the classroom chores without being asked and without being thanked, and I make a point of thanking them because I know from experience that the children who never ask for recognition are not always the ones who need it least. I understand those children. I was one. My family gatherings, for as long as I can remember, worked the following way. My Aunt Karen would arrive first. She would survey the space with the eye of a woman who has decided in advance what needs to be corrected, and she would begin assigning roles, tasks, positions. Who would manage the drinks? Who would coordinate the children? Who would handle the kitchen? I would handle the kitchen. This was never stated explicitly. It didn't need to be. It existed in the particular way Karen said my name when I arrived. Sarah, there's so much to do, in the way she handed me an apron before I had taken off my coat. It existed in the way the cousins had learned early that if they stayed near the television until the cooking started, the cooking would be handled by the time they thought to offer. I did it for years. I cooked and set tables and washed dishes and refilled glasses and wrapped leftovers and wiped counters, and at some point it stopped being something I was asked to do and became simply what I did. The way water stops being something that flows downhill and becomes just the nature of water. Karen would say, to guests, to relatives, to anyone within hearing, Sarah's always been good at helping. She said it warmly. She said it the way you speak about someone you are fond of. And for years I accepted it as a compliment because I had spent so long inside the system that I could no longer see clearly where helpfulness ended and exploitation began. I am a teacher. I had spent 11 years teaching children to raise their hand when something wasn't right. I had never once raised mine. Let me be specific, because I think you will recognize what I am describing. Easter Sunday 4 years ago. 14 family members. I arrived at 10 to help prepare. Karen's daughter Melissa arrived at noon to eat. By the time the meal was served at 2, I had been in that kitchen for 4 hours. I had made 2 side dishes, a dessert, and had managed the cleanup from the prep. When we sat down, Melissa asked if I had gotten my hair done differently and said it looked nice. I thanked her. I passed the rolls. The following Christmas, I brought a pie I had baked from scratch, a project that had taken most of a Saturday. Karen set it on the dessert table without comment and introduced the store-bought tart her neighbor had contributed as a lovely addition from a wonderful woman. Later, when the pie was gone and the tart was 3/4 full, nobody mentioned it. I washed the pie plate. These are small things. I know they are small things. I spent years telling myself they were small things, the way you tell yourself that a single degree of misalignment in a structure is negligible, right up until the building shifts. The Christmas that broke me, not loudly, not in any way that was visible, was 3 years ago. It was a dinner for 22 people. I had been in the kitchen since noon. Not because anyone had asked me to be there, or rather, not in any way I could point to. It was the accumulated weight of assumption, the invisible architecture of a family that had organized itself around the fact of my willingness and stopped noticing it was willingness at all. By the time dinner was served, every seat at the table was full. 22 people. 22 chairs. My name was not on any of them because in the seating arrangement Karen had made, and she always made a seating arrangement, I was in the kitchen. Karen came to find me while the others were sitting down. "You'll eat later, sweetheart," she said. "We're a bit tight on seats." She said it without pausing. She said it the way you tell someone the bathroom is occupied, a minor logistical note, nothing requiring an apology. Then she went back to the table. I ate from a paper plate, standing at the kitchen counter, while 22 members of my family had Christmas dinner in the next room. I could hear the conversation through the door. Laughter. The clink of glasses. Karen giving a toast. I washed my plate when I was done. Then I went back in to clear the first course. My mother was at that table. Her name is Diane. She is Karen's younger sister, and she has spent most of her life in a gentle, practiced deference to her older sister that she does not appear to notice anymore, the way you stop noticing the sound of traffic when you have lived near a highway long enough. She saw what happened. I know she saw it because we made eye contact through the kitchen door when I came in to collect the salad plates, and her expression did the thing it does when she knows something is wrong and has already decided not to address it. She handed me her plate. I took it. I drove home that Christmas night and sat in my parked car for 20 minutes and tried to identify what I was feeling. I am an elementary school teacher. I spend my days helping 8-year-olds find words for things they don't have language for yet. I could not find language for what I was sitting with. It wasn't rage. It was something more like the specific exhaustion of a person who has finally done the full addition and arrived at a number they don't want to accept. I called my grandfather. His name was Henry Mitchell. He was 84 at the time of that phone call, 87 when he died, and he was the kind of man who had learned so thoroughly the difference between speaking and being heard that he had reduced his sentences to the ones that counted. He answered on the second ring, which meant he had been awake, which meant he had been thinking. "How was dinner?" he asked. I told him about the chair, not with drama, just the fact of it. The kitchen, the paper plate, the table through the door. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Families tell you who they are when they think nobody important is watching." I didn't know what to do with that sentence. It sounded like wisdom, but I couldn't locate the comfort in it. I thanked him and said goodnight, and told myself I would think about it later. I thought about it for 3 years. The wooden box had been on his desk for as long as I could remember. Cedar, dark with age, initials carved in the lid. When I was small, I used to ask him what was inside, and he would say family photographs and some old papers, and then redirect the conversation with the ease of a man who had decided what was ready to be known and what wasn't. Once, when I was perhaps 9 or 10, I asked if I could open it, and he set his hand on the lid and said, "One day you'll understand why I keep everything." I thought he meant the photographs. I thought he was a sentimental man who valued the past, which he was. I did not understand that keeping everything meant something more precise than that. The box appeared at family gatherings sometimes, on a shelf or a side table, the way a familiar object migrates through a house. Karen would pass it without interest. My cousins never touched it. I would find myself looking at it when I came in from the kitchen to refill something, a strange pull, the feeling of a thing waiting to be understood. Grandpa would sometimes be watching when I looked at it. He never said anything on those occasions. He would just nod slightly, the nod of a man filing something away. The last time I saw him well was a Sunday in March, 8 months before he died. I drove to his house. The same house where he had lived for 50 years, where Karen's entitlement had been practiced across decades of holiday tables. And we sat in his kitchen, and he made coffee the way he always had, strong enough to clarify your thinking. He was moving slowly. He was aware of it, and he didn't pretend otherwise, which was one of the things I loved most about him. After a while, he got up and came back from his study, carrying the wooden box. He set it on the table between us and left his hand on the lid for a moment. "I want you to keep this," he said. I told him there was no rush, that he should hold on to it. He shook his head once. Some things need to travel before they're needed. I took it home and put it on my bookshelf and did not open it because he had not told me to open it, and because I understood without being told that it would open when it was supposed to. He died in November, quietly, at home, in the early morning, the way he had lived, without making more noise than the situation required. My mother called me from his house. Her voice had the steadiness of someone concentrating very hard on not breaking. She said his name. She said he had gone in his sleep. She said Karen was already there, which told me something about how quickly Karen moved when something shifted in the family's landscape. I drove to the house. Karen was in the living room with a notepad. She was making a list of what needed to be handled. Arrangements, notifications, the names of people who should be called in what order. She looked up when I came in and said, "Sarah, the kitchen is a bit of a mess." I went to the kitchen. I want to tell you that I did it numbly, automatically, without processing what it meant that my grandfather was 4 hours dead, and my first instruction from his eldest daughter was to clean the kitchen. I want to tell you I was on autopilot. But the honest version is that some part of me was fully awake to it, watching it happen, noting it the way I note the child who always eats alone at lunch, clearly without drama, with the specific weariness of someone who has counted this particular thing too many times. I washed the cups. I wiped the counter. I threw away the grounds from his last pot of coffee, which felt like a small violence I immediately regretted. The will reading was scheduled for 2 weeks after the funeral. Arthur Greer's office, 10 in the morning, immediate family only. Karen arrived with 2 pens. My mother sat beside me and kept her hands in her lap. My 2 cousins, Karen's children, sat against the far wall with the posture of people who have been told they are about to receive something. I had no particular expectation. In the architecture of this family, I was the helpful one, the kitchen one, the one who asked for nothing and received accordingly. I had made a kind of peace with that, or rather, I had located a shelf deep inside myself where I stored the things I had made a kind of peace with and tried not to look at them directly. Arthur read the will in the measured voice of a man who has delivered news like this many times and understands that measured is the only appropriate speed. The house passed to Karen and my mother jointly, with a buyout clause clearly specified. The savings accounts were divided. Personal property was itemized. A modest sum to each grandchild. Karen received the largest share of the liquid assets as the eldest child with the longest established claim in the family's accounting. My name appeared once. A sum that was kind without being significant, the way you'd leave something to someone you were fond of. Karen relaxed by visible degrees as the reading progressed. By the time Arthur reached the end of the primary document, she had uncapped one of her pens. Arthur paused. He set down the will and reached beneath the table. He brought out the wooden box. I recognized it before anyone else did, which meant I was the first person in that room whose breath changed. Cedar. Brass latch. HM in the lid. The box I had carried from his kitchen to my bookshelf 8 months ago, which Arthur had apparently collected when he collected the other estate documents, per an instruction I was only now understanding had been made years in advance. Karen looked at it, then at Arthur. "There's one additional letter," Arthur said. Henry was specific about when it should be read. He looked at me. He asked that it be read aloud, in this room, to the family, but he addressed it to you, Sarah. The room had the quality of air before weather. Everyone still. Karen's pen not moving. Arthur unlatched the box. Inside, on top of everything else, was an envelope with my name on it in my grandfather's handwriting, the careful, slightly slanted letters of a man who had written by hand his entire life and taken it seriously. Arthur opened the envelope. He unfolded 3 pages. He cleared his throat once. Then he read, "I am not going to give you every word because some of it belongs to me in a way I am not ready to share. But I will tell you the shape of it because the shape is the part that mattered to everyone in that room." He wrote that he had been watching for a long time. He wrote that he had watched every holiday, every gathering, every dinner where a table was set and roles were assigned and someone cooked and someone was served. He wrote that he had watched who arrived early and who arrived when the food was ready, who cleaned up and who found reasons to be elsewhere when the cleaning started, who asked how people were doing and who asked what they were getting. He wrote that families have a habit of labeling the people who do the work as helpers and the people who show up for the benefits as family, and that this labeling is one of the quiet injustices that passes unaddressed because no one with the power to address it has sufficient reason to inconvenience themselves. He wrote, "They called you helpful, Sarah. I called you dependable. There is a difference. Helpful is a trait people take advantage of. Dependable is a character that takes years to build, and that I watched you build, quietly, without applause, in kitchens and driveways and hospital waiting rooms while other people found somewhere more comfortable to be." Karen's pen was in her hand, but she was not writing. Arthur continued, "I have spent the last 10 years deciding what it means to leave something to someone. Not money. Anyone can leave money. I mean, leave something. The thing that communicates, after you are gone, what you actually believed about who a person was." He turned to the second page. "The family will say, I was confused. They will say, I was influenced. They will say these things because the alternative is to admit that I saw them clearly for 40 years, and that what I saw did not earn what they believe they are owed." My mother made a small sound. I did not look at her. I was not confused. Arthur set down the second page. He reached into the wooden box and pressed, gently, on the interior base. It moved. The base of the box was not the bottom of the box. Arthur lifted it out, a thin cedar panel, fitted so precisely that it would have passed any casual inspection without question, and set it on the table. Beneath it was a second compartment, and in the second compartment, organized in the careful way my grandfather organized everything that mattered, was a folder. Arthur opened it. He reviewed the first page in the silence of a man who has already read it and is preparing to explain it. In addition to the assets described in the primary will, he said, Henry established an irrevocable trust 11 years ago. The trust holds title to the lake house property on Clearwater Road, along with an investment account he maintained separately from the joint family assets. He turned the page. The sole beneficiary of the trust, named at the time of its establishment and unchanged across 11 years of annual reviews, is Sarah Ann Mitchell. He turned another page. The combined value of the trust assets, as of the most recent appraisal, is approximately $1.4 million. Karen's chair moved. The particular scrape of someone who has shifted their weight without meaning to, whose body has responded to information before their mind has organized a response to it. My mother's hand found my arm under the table. I was looking at the folder, at the pages Arthur had set flat so the table could see them, at my own name typed on the trust document in plain black letters, with a date beneath it that predated every holiday I had spent standing at a kitchen counter. He had been planning this for 11 years. While I cooked and cleaned and set tables and was handed an apron at the door, he had been sitting in his study with this box and this folder and this particular, patient knowledge of exactly what he was going to do about it. Karen spoke first because Karen always speaks first. She said my grandfather had been confused in his final years. She said 11 years was a long time, and a lot could happen to a person's judgment over 11 years. She said I had clearly positioned herself, she said, as though I were a chess piece with a strategy, and that the family should have an independent review. She said it in the voice she uses when she is managing a situation, The warm but steel voice she has deployed at 100 family dinners to redirect conversations that were moving in directions she hadn't planned. Arthur let her finish. Then he opened a second folder. Henry anticipated a challenge, he said. He was thorough. The second folder contained medical evaluations. 3 of them, from 3 separate physicians, conducted in the year the trust was established, and again at 5-year intervals. Each one documented full cognitive competence. Each one included a notation in my grandfather's own words, dictated to his attorney, explaining that the trust was his decision, made independently, and that he was aware it would be unexpected to some members of his family. The second folder also contained a recording, a small digital file, transferred to a flash drive, labeled in my grandfather's handwriting with a date from 18 months prior. Arthur produced a small speaker and played 40 seconds of it. My grandfather's voice. Clear. Measured. The voice of a man who had thought carefully about every word before he said it. My name is Henry Mitchell. I am making this recording voluntarily, in the presence of my attorney Arthur Greer, to document that I am of sound mind and full understanding of the contents and implications of the trust one established for my granddaughter Sarah Mitchell. This trust was created because I watched for many years and I understood, with clarity, what I saw. No one influenced this decision. I made it because it was right. That is all. The recording ended. The room was very quiet. Karen said, in a voice that had lost most of its management, "He never said anything." Arthur closed the folder. "He said everything," Arthur replied. "He just said it to the right person in writing with witnesses." The meeting concluded within the hour. Arthur walked each of us through the relevant documents and explained the trust structure and provided contacts for any further questions. He was kind and thorough, and his manner contained no editorial, which I respected. Karen left without speaking to me. Her children followed her, the way they had followed her their entire lives, because following Karen was the primary navigation skill they had been taught. My mother stayed. We sat in 2 chairs in Arthur's waiting room after everyone else had gone, and she held her purse in her lap and looked at the carpet for a long time. "I want to say something," she said finally. I waited. I saw what happened at Christmas. 3 years ago. The chair. She said it to her purse rather than to me. "I handed you my plate." "I know," I said. I should have said something to Karen. I never did. I kept telling myself it wasn't worth the argument. I had heard that sentence before in other forms about other things. The particular language of people who see injustice and locate the cost of addressing it before they locate the cost of silence. "It was worth it, Mom," I said. Not with anger. Just as a fact. She nodded. Her eyes were wet. "Your grandfather saw what I couldn't bring myself to see," she said. Or what I could see and kept walking past. We sat together a little longer in that quiet room, and I let her stay in what she had said without softening it for her, because I had spent too many years softening things for people at my own expense. She did not need me to make it easier. She needed to sit with it. That was the most honest conversation we had ever had. Karen retained her own attorney 3 weeks later. The challenge was filed within the month on the grounds of undue influence and diminished capacity. I want to be honest about how I felt during those weeks, because it was not triumphant. It was the grinding, low-grade exhaustion of a person who had hoped that one clear revelation might settle something, and was now discovering that some people require the process as well as the outcome. But here is what the process looked like, practically. Arthur produced the medical evaluations. Arthur produced the recordings. Arthur produced 11 years of annual trust reviews, each one signed by my grandfather, each one notarized, each one accompanied by a contemporaneous note from Arthur himself documenting Henry's mental state and the voluntary nature of his instructions. The challenge was reviewed by a probate judge who asked Karen's attorney, twice, to specify the evidence of confusion or influence. Both times the answer was thin. The challenge was dismissed. I did not say anything to Karen after the dismissal. I did not call her. I did not write to her. I had nothing to say that the documents had not already said more precisely than I ever could, and I had learned from my grandfather that precision is its own eloquence. She has not called me either. The family is fractured along the lines that were always present but had been papered over by the assumption that I would continue to cook and clean and absorb and accommodate indefinitely. Without that assumption, the architecture could not hold. Some things need to be true more than they need to be comfortable. The wooden box is on my kitchen table as I tell you this. I brought home the day of the will reading, and I have not moved it. It sits where I can see it from the couch, in the same way it sat on his desk for all those years, present, patient, containing more than it appeared to. I have looked inside it many times now. The false bottom, which I remove and replace carefully because it is old, and I do not want to damage it. The folder with the trust documents, which I have read more times than is probably necessary. And underneath the folder, the photographs he kept, actual photographs, just as he always said, the family pictures spanning 50 years, all of us at various ages and various holidays, and somewhere in almost every one of them, me in the background or near the kitchen door, or standing at the edge of a table that had one too few chairs. He had been documenting the whole time. At the very bottom of the second compartment, beneath everything else, there was one more envelope, smaller than the others. Just my name on it, no instructions, no legal formality. His handwriting. I opened it last, the night after the will reading, sitting alone in my apartment at the kitchen table with a cup of tea I kept forgetting to drink. Inside was a single index card, his handwriting on both sides. The front said, "You are never the maid. They mistook kindness for obligation. That is their failure, not your definition." I turned it over. The back said, "The lake house needs new porch screens." I left the measurements in the folder. I know you'll want to do it yourself. I sat with that index card for a long time. The porch screens. 11 years of careful legal preparation and a trust worth $1,400,000, and the final note was about the porch screens, because he knew me and he knew that what I would need most in the practical days after everything else was something to do with my hands. Something to fix. Something that would let me be useful in a space that was now entirely mine. He saw me. He had always seen me. Not as the helper or the kitchen girl or the dependable one who could be handed an apron at the door. He saw what I had built, quietly, across 32 years of showing up and staying and doing what needed doing without keeping a ledger of what I was owed in return. He kept the ledger. I think about the line he used to say, "Families tell you who they are when they think nobody important is watching." I understood it wrong for years. I thought he meant that families reveal themselves in moments of unguarded selfishness. And that is true. But the other half of the sentence, the half I missed, was this: somebody important was always watching. He was. And he had spent 11 years making sure that what he watched was recorded, notarized, witnessed, filed, and stored in a cedar box with a false bottom that no one thought to look for because they had decided long ago that there was nothing inside worth finding. I went to the lake house in the spring, the first time I had been there in years. Drove up on a Saturday morning with a truck bed full of supplies, the screen material, the frame tools, the measurements from his folder, which were exact because he was always exact. I worked on the porch most of the afternoon. The lake was very still. There were birds I didn't know the names of in the trees along the bank. The house smelled like cedar and old wood and the particular closed-up mustiness of a place that has been waiting. When I finished the first screen and held it up to check the fit, it was right. The measurements were right. Everything was exactly what it needed to be, prepared years in advance by someone who understood that the right foundation doesn't announce itself. It simply holds. I sat on the porch until the light changed. They spent years handing me chores because they believed I was the least important person in the room. My grandfather spent those same years taking notes. He left them in a box with a false bottom and my name on the door.